The blockade of Sudan's decision economically by the United States unilaterally in 1997, after clearly on the various aspects of life in this country, and put it away from any position possible commercial competing in the regional environment and the continental in the field of transport, which is the lifeblood of all time and era. Away from politics and its confusing transformations, Khartoum, which is the center of the African continent and the Middle East, an outstanding location, will be a central goal of these unilateral sanctions in the vast airspace. That was a decision that lies aircrafts on the ground.
إذا نظرنا لمسألة العقوبات القسرية الأحادية من منظور الأمم المتحدة بنجد أن ميثاق الأمم
Pertaining the legitimacy of these sanctions, there isn't any legitimacy for unilateral coercive sanctions, because the international legitimacy is derived from sources of international law and international charters. So if we look to the issue of unilateral sanctions, we find that the UN Charter deprives them, because the idea of the Charter deprives such sanctions for its negative impacts on the people, both on the side of human rights and peace process. The ideas on which the UN Charter contradict absolutely with such sort of sanctions. Air transport is one of the most important aspects of the economy in any country in the contemporary world, where no longer possible to wait too long until you reach the cargo or passengers to the airport in a changing world fast rhythm, as well as the fleet of planes were filled continental space and stop the international Sudan Air, the size of the national carrier, because of this US unilateral aspect.
مجرد ما حصل الحظر الأمريكي على الخطوط الجوية السودانية.
Once the US embargo on Sudan railways took place, the infrastructure of maintenance and engineering were deteriorated, while the professional staff migrated to foreign countries. It comes to mind too much that the US unilateral economic blockade means in one of the aspects studied carefully to stop the scientific and technical development which characterized the Sudan since the last century.
النقل هو عصب الحياة وهو مفهوم التجارة الدولية.
Transport is the nerve of life. It is the concept of international commerce. 80% of people depend on transport, including state libraries. The economy depends on transport. So when you impede transport means that refer to impede 80% of economic activity in the country. The people's life in any state and citizens depend on transport as a means of providing food, health and other needs of human beings. And the golden rule of the aviation where says what brings the ability of aircraft engines to embark on a navigation is human mind, not fuel. So how Sudan Air take off itself after 18 years of blockade by the US administration?
الطيران دلوقتي بكلف السودان.
Aviation now costs Sudan about 500 million US dollars. Traveling tickets abroad cost Sudan a lot. And if these United States sanctions stopped at the borders to prevent the sale or purchase of US-made planes to this country, it would have been possible to find an alternative disadvantage to fill such a large technical deficiencies, but it forces states and international companies operating in the field of aviation technology to continue what started from the store and tied to the capacity of this country in the field of aviation. Seemed the form of this blockade universal to the far border.
طيارات بوينغ أيضا ما في قطع غيار.
Boeing airplanes spare parts are also banned, and so it stopped flights. Some models of Airbus planes face the same fate. Aviation is severely affected, with transport sectors in Sudan are completely disabled due to foreign embargo. A plane to be disrupted away from the squares in forced retirement is a great loss, not like any other loss, only the survival of an entire people captive to the mood of the companies which flies to this country between now and then, and the presumption does not exist here between these civilian passengers and any form of politicization or prior conviction which descend to the fact that they are a stain because they are Sudanese. Reality, just like flying in the heart of the storm without enough fuel and compass directions, came by these coercive sanctions to this country.
كل التكنولوجيا الموجودة عندنا في الخطوط الجوية السودانية هي أمريكية كلها. الآن الورش
Aviation technology in Sudan is completely American. The needed tools and equipments, and so the professional cadre is related to the Europe and American countries. And between the aviation and the rail intermines the story of kneeling on the ground and waiting for the impossible at the moment when it's almost taken by despair. 20 US Libra outside the line, out of service and outside professional classification or ready for action. How it seems to form a country that stopped all of the aborate of US made locomotives and are after the other throughout the 18-year-old. Railways are affected by embargo, so some heavy industry related to it, and that directly contributed in raising the cost of transporting goods and engines maintenance. Within this workshop met all the Sudanese locomotives and then began to leave, and its departure this time was internally towards the end and scrapping. What language can reflect the extent of the tragedy when one collides with the fact that these locomotives carrying supplies, food and medicine and all daily life accessories to people throughout the million square in Darfur and South Kordofan and the Blue Nile until the limits of Nimuli in southern Sudan, and the food shortage too with the war, just like the relationship of these thugs US sanctions in terms of intimacy and casual and final denouncement.
نجد أن الإسبيرات هي عامل أساسي لصيانة الوابورات. الإسبيرات
Spare parts are very important for maintaining all sorts of the US-made engines, starting from main engines beside electric parts, spares, locomotives, and different underframe, left negative impacts on due to lack of American spare parts. If not disturbing anyone in the Western world, that disrupted these locomotives and enhanced by factors such as disruption to prevent the scientific and grant scholarships to universities and specialized engineering colleges, would be some trouble in a large some extent to inform people there in this capital flowing with these unilateral decisions towards developing countries in the third world political reasons that 15,000 workers who had been dispersed since the year 2000 between marginal professions and unemployment and the need in spite of the advanced scientific specialities. At the heart of this darkness, there are those who are preparing to work inside the workshop, which they lost big experience in crashes of this locomotive which they know one and one just like their own children, and of their hearts with their pulsing heart break over what the locomotives turn to calling this West American West specifically. Is there one to respond?
فرض على فرضته امريكا على السودان، ده فرض على الشعب السوداني كله مش على الحكومه. عانى منه الشعب معاناه شديده جدا. نحن نامل من الاداره يعني امريكان سيستم او امريكان ديبارتمنت to take permission about this case. This case is very difficult for the Sudanese people. All the Sudanese people serve this permission will be for the people live in the Sudan. We need the American system to take solution about this case. Now we are suffering from running parties for a locomotive of American system. We ask them to take permission about this case. Now Sudan will need this spare part for the people, not for the government. People take this locomotive to drive from city to other. This is a problem. Now we haven't any spare part of American locomotive. We beg the American system to give us permission and a spare part for this locomotive, because people surface from these spare parts, not Sudan government. Now we ask the American system to make a solution about this.
This legendary sea that full of dozens of stories since ancient times, Caspian or the Red Sea, stands bewildered between which is going on inside and experienced by these vessels which forgot the taste of the sea water and sail in the parts of the world as they did before making the US sanctions on Sudan and Hindabomba and maritime vital importance and for the entire African continent countries.
بالنسبة للإجراءات تحت المشتريات تحت الإصدارات في صعوبات بقت.
Concerning the procedures of spare part sales, There are some problems facing the authority in the process of bank payments, which is dealt with extremely, and the refusal of financial transformations, and that led to delaying delivery of spare parts. If the policy is moving towards an interest in the wallet of utilitarian and more commercial than a simple countryman can imagine, this workshop is simply more like dream. Is it possible to operate a workshop that was established in 1907 during the British colonial rule and still maintain their first equipment like loyal lava? Was it a monopoly of development? And how in one day knowledge roamed the seas of this world until it reached the borders of Brazil?
وكانت هذه التجربة مفتاح لأشياء كثيرة جدا.
Since 1965, there was an attempt at Rome for starting Navigation Research Institute, which is found now. The experiment of can the human being live inside water and into which extent of time. That experiment was the key for many things, which opened the ways and horizon for us to establish this institute. But at first the institute depended on many technologies imported from Germany, France, and several Western countries. We have been strongly connected with America at that time, and this is one of the factors affected many activities, particularly the study of We have been strongly connected with America, and that is one of the factors affected on many activities, particularly the study of different navigatory systems. In this basin are unloading giant cargo vessels, and tells these cranes work day and night, but it was reeling from the impact of the foot and the lack of number. The road to building a peaceful meeting and collaborator these African countries passes from this basin. And practically that Washington looked beyond government regulations, beyond sanctions and consequences to this man, grieving at the core of his humanity, banned from the safe and comfortable movement, and banned from the transfer of goods from port to port, along the sea and all the seas and oceans of earth. Is there any logic here?
تأثر النقل الجوي وكثير من الطائرات والنقل البري.
Aviation and navigation sectors are affected due to these US sanctions. The victims are those who died because of these US coercive sanctions, which didn't take into account human rights. We call on the US administration not to practice its tough policies and atrocity among the Sudanese nation, which respects all values and principles in the Charter of Human Rights. The alternatives in the transport sector in any state is feasible in the short or long term, as they reflect the need at the moment and need of man in this country and the whole of the African countries that sustains development begins to roll up seriously, or Sudan has become part of a world without humanity.